shutting down now.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time, until these vaccines, nobody knows how these are going to work.
I know it's going to take some time.
In Germany, they had things under control, and suddenly in Sweden and Germany, they've gone back to again.
Yeah, Germany suffered a lot as well, and the problem with the EU is that you can pretty much freely travel across countries.
That's true, yeah.
And depending on the restrictions that every country has set up, I mean, originally we closed the airports in Greece, but then we couldn't do it because the tourism industry wouldn't survive.
Yeah.
So they started opening everything up. So people from all over EU just thought they could do, vacation in Greece, which was...
Yes. Everybody has a second home in Athens.
Yeah. I know, it's weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, I hope it... Yeah.
Yeah, can we get started? So we would ideally like, you would actually introduce yourself, and rather than me reading out from a text about your work and. Hey guys,
so what I have prepared, if you're all guys ready, I'm happy to.
Yeah, let's get started.
Okay, so I have prepared a few slides, and afterward I'm happy to discuss everything. I know this is a new frontiers of visual storytelling course. What I've set this up not as much as the new frontiers as mostly things I'm excited to work with. But first I want to go through what Al Jazeera does. I've been a member to begin with, so you guys get to know me. I'm Konstantinos. I'm the guy with the long name that everyone else is confused about pronouncing. I'm a visual journalist for years. I've been doing social storytelling trainings now. I used to be, for the past 7 years, I've worked at AJ Labs, which is the data, interactive, and visual storytelling arm of Al Jazeera, and on the social newsroom, on the social video team. And I will go through first how a visual journalism department works, like AJ Labs. So AJ Labs is a team mainly comprised of designers and programmers. We also used to have a spot for an editorial person that would help us shift our ideas into valid visual storytelling projects. And also, this was a very much experimental team that like to take some time. We used to say that we do 80% actual visual work and 20% experimentation. So how does this work? It started with finding something that we were really, really passionate about. So for example, at some point in 2013, right after New York Times had presented the Snowfall to every one of us, I thought that long forms would be a really good idea. We weren't 100% mobile focused at the time. So I had to search for a story and then connect it to the idea of doing a long form, like search for editorial value. Can we use this long form thing for editorial? So after that, we would typically make a pitch to the newsroom. I would say, we want to take this story and turn it into a visual storytelling project. Then we do all the production within AJ Labs, we'd launch it. What we do after that is carefully watch it, obviously do the sustaining, meaning updating and everything, but mainly taking user data, see how people interacted with our visual project, and then learn from it, make it a case study, and first of all, train each other, and then train the newsroom into how this visual storytelling workflow works. We were really, really open in whatever we wanted to use. In 2017, we just use more than 10 different platforms to build projects. Some as basic as, you know, Adobe Muse or Google Amp. You can find this everywhere, just software that you take and start working with it. We were using some JavaScript libraries that will help us visualize projects that we were interested in experimenting. See how these libraries or these technologies would help shift our storytelling. But we always had 4 focus points. The story had to work on all platforms. And this now may sound a little bit outdated, but back then we were doing both desktop and mobile versions. AJ Labs has moved to strictly mobile-only versions that happen to work on desktop as well. I will talk a lot about user interfaces, but all our project has to be easy to navigate and consume. Obviously, any technology would be the best way to do the story, meaning we wouldn't do something just because we could, but being able to use the technology to tell a story a specific way was really important to us. And obviously, you know, be an Al Jazeera project, meaning this should definitely cater to our audience, be what we used to say, the voice of the voiceless, or maybe not, but at least cater to people who are interested in consuming Al Jazeera news type stories. So we had this 4-step process of producing stuff, and it would definitely begin back in the office. We used to call it the Batcave before we were moved, because we were like experimenting and having all the gadgets and everything in there. So it started in the Batcaves with a pitch. We would find an editorial angle, and when the newsroom agreed that they wanted us to cover the story this way, we would storyboard it extensively. And this is the procedure that I love the most. And I'm teaching it now as my social storytelling team. It's the huge advantage of storyboarding a project, and then doing a production design, meaning making workflows, making lists on how we would produce this thing. Then it would move to the field. We would get our journalists on the field to report, shoot, and deliver raw material. And then back at the newsroom and the Batcave, we would structure it into a project, would give all the editorial treatment that the project deserved. We would design. This was my primary, apart from the production design, this was what I was primarily doing for AJ Labs. And then producing across platforms, meaning that we wouldn't launch only on the web, but would make a version for Facebook, a version for Instagram, try to find the best storytelling niche treatment for each platform. And then when the project was launched, back at AJ Labs, who would definitely work to promote it, again, doing all the social deliverables for this, sustaining and keeping it up to date for as long as it takes. Measure it extensively. We had written our own pieces of code or analytics, and we definitely used all the other analytics available as well. And then educate the team, making it a case study, as I told you, on how what we learned from using this project. One of the stuff that we did that was probably our biggest project in 2015 was Palestine Remix. So if you don't know it, you can obviously take a look at it. This is a video-driven storytelling website. The idea was that we would take 20 documentary films spanning around 50 minutes to an hour each. Some of them were episodic, and we want to make them available to as many people as possible. But then again, we thought, instead of building a web platform for this, we want to let people have their own interpretation of Palestine based on those films. So anyone could go in and highlight any part of the text and drop it to a new window. You can see the video, the tutorial video that we made. So eventually you would string together a bit of video pieces, let's say, to create a whole bigger video, a standalone video that you could share on social media. And this could be the representation of whatever you think Palestine was. For example, you could search for the term Arafat across all 20 documentaries, and then you'd see bits and pieces of how our filmmakers was mentioning Arafat, and you could just highlight some text, drag and drop it, and then create a video about Arafat. This was really, really important, and most of the stuff that I've learned doing visual journalism are based on this experience, because this was not our typical visual storytelling project. It took a huge team of people to do this across 4 languages, to do a story that is so much dependent on video and audio and text. And this required some very, very delicate programming, some design, some skills that we employed, and people we brought in to help us, that made this a major project. But the biggest thing for us doing Palestine Remix were 2 things. One, the metrics that we got, and the second, the lessons that we've learned on how people were treating our project. I will talk a lot about this, but let's get back to the original New Frontiers of Visual Storytelling. I want to go through the stuff that, because obviously we were like 5 years later, and although I encourage you to go to PalestineRemix.com and play a lot with it, because this is a project that you can learn a lot about this, on how the complex visual storytelling projects are done. I have a list of 10 stuff that I look forward to work with, some more than others. And I know that you've been, during this series of getting people to talk to you, you've been exposed to a lot of really good knowledge about them. And obviously, when I'm talking about virtual reality, I know that you had recently my good friend Sarah Jones talking to you. I honestly, I'm a huge fan of what she does for virtual reality. Our IG Labs has been producing a few 360-degree and virtual reality projects since we got access to cameras and everything. Then Al Jazeera brought in a team from Riot Multimedia and rebranded it as AJ Contrast. And this is an amazing team that I obviously, if you haven't heard about them, I definitely urge you to look at their work, because they're doing amazing work. And they took over. I was mainly the consultant on how to take the stories from the 360 to the social platforms. So I know a lot about how they work, and we've discussed a lot about projects that they did for virtual reality. One thing that definitely have learned working on VR projects with them is that I love that they have a huge emotional connection. To me, they are more personal than a design that you share. Maybe it is because you can take a look around and it's not about the story of one person, but you can see how where this person lives and where this person moves. I mean, it has always been an amazing tool to tell stories of communities. Al Jazeera has done a lot of stories like this, and obviously, what we did is have users become virtual reality producers themselves. We were giving them 360-degree cameras and training them from Yemen to Iraq to Afghanistan. I think there are several places that common people have told their own stories in virtual reality and 360-degree video, and that has opened up our horizons a lot. one thing that I was really interested in working with in VR is, as a news designer, creating user interfaces for VR, which mostly focuses on how to, I would like to say, script the user experience, because by default 360-degree video allows you to roam freely in 360 degrees, but I don't want our audience to miss some key points. So I've worked a lot with within AJ Labs on 360 projects to take to use a user interface with which people would know where to look and do not miss everything. I was honestly not a huge fan of VR in the beginning, but I'm starting to view some really interesting projects. Apart from the storytelling value that it has, and obviously we always had the checklist item. Is VR and 360-degree video the best way to tell the story? In some cases, it was. I'm starting to see really interesting VR projects coming up, and I'm really excited to take a second look in 2021 on VR projects. I'm more excited to do augmented reality first, and not talking only about filters, but talking about a little bit more complex stuff that help us tell stories with AR. Obviously, working with platforms, I used to be on the last year and a half that I worked with Al Jazeera was Instagram and Snapchat lead, and this kind of exposed me a lot into custom lenses and how would you get people to use lenses to tell stories. I like the example that I put here, which is a very basic but very useful for the audience thing that #OurStories did on Snapchat. They created an AR filter for use when taking interviews. So instead of asking questions, the questions just pop up and you just have to record your answer to this. Also, #OurStories did an amazing thing when they used AR filters to cover the identities of people that they wanted to speak. Perhaps they were in danger or being in a sensitive place, and this was a really smart idea. Instead of blurring or mosaicing a face, to use AR to do this as well. Also, wearable journalism is really interesting, using Google glasses or Snapchat glasses. Definitely, this is not a technology that has matured well, but I'm mostly interested in what comes next from the platforms. And also, I have been using Adobe Aero, which is one of the parts of the Creative Cloud offering by Adobe that allows you to use 3D programs like Cinema 4D to create items and then drop them into real world scenery. I think this would revolutionize AR deliverables from newsrooms, and I'm really looking forward to see if there are going to be any good projects done with Aero. There is another thing before I go to the more traditional stuff that I don't think we have figured out yet how to do, which is artificial intelligence and machine learning. We did a few visual projects using machine learning at AJ Labs. I have been following a lot Journalism AI, which is, if you don't know them, you should definitely follow them on Twitter and see what they're doing. I think it's done by LSE University and Polis in the UK. It's a team of people who are really interested in how AI can invade into newsrooms and help us do stuff. They just recently posted the 10 things they learned doing AI projects during this year, so I suggest you take a look at it. To me and to AJ Labs, machine learning helped us, first of all, do data journalism projects, meaning it was easier to use machine learning to sort data and analyze data and user behavior. So we found a use to this. Mostly, it would free time from mundane tasks that had to be like repeated work that we had to do. You just write a script that can do it for you. And again, experimenting with Adobe products, I think what they've done with Adobe Sensei, which is the AI tool that is included now on Photoshop, on After Effects, on stuff that we use daily, is going to be really huge. Imagine that right now, when you cut out someone from a picture, Adobe Sensei can use this content-aware feature that will do a somewhat good work in covering up the hole that you're cutting out the person. And to us, this has been useful in when we were doing photo treatments. We would cut out someone, or maybe we would want to put a picture of a person on After Effects and move it around. So we would use cutouts and content-aware features from Adobe Photoshop to fill out the blanks. So at least it would help us do our work faster and better. Obviously, this is just a very minor feature of machine learning and AI that we dived into, but I'm really, really looking forward to see what comes next in the newsroom with machine learning. Another thing that is more down to earth or everyday use is computational photography. I'm trained in shooting video and images and everything, so I do it for my job daily. And I have been teaching mobile journalism a lot and using my phone to capture video and photography. And being a little bit purist, I was always kind of worried against computational photography. But what I've seen from Google Pixel and iPhone and the other big latest phones, they are starting to shape up what we call everyday storytelling by help us cover our problems in shooting. I mean, they can be conditions, they can be skills or whatever, using algorithms. And although I would never compare the quality of a professional photographer, professional photograph, to something that you just get with your phone and it's automatically corrected, I would say that when you're on location or when you're doing some visual projects from the field, I like where this is going, where we're having not only just the depth of field for photographers, not something that looks pretty, but to me, something that looks usable and bringing a quality to the footage that you get from the field that is way better than whatever we gotten from mobile phones the past few years. And obviously, being available to everyone means that it will get better. All these apps getting data about how they are used, how computational photography is being used to create, I mean, multiple exposures or correct or fix whatever we do wrong. This would help computational photography become even better for our run and gun storytelling projects. Being a part of when I moved off AJ Labs and went to the social desk, which was producing visual stories for social media, got me really excited in social storytelling, as in not TV video, but video that is created for social platforms that has that its main aim is to engage with people and not only like tell the news, but let people start discussions, that it's framed and produced and delivered in a way that connects with everyone as we are using social media. The biggest advantage of doing social stories is that we are posting them on social media and the audience is already there. The audience is already scrolling up and down every day trying to find something original, something that is really good and different. So doing visual projects on social platform is interesting, at least, and useful to most newsrooms. To me, is more useful because I've been spending a year and a half learning how social platforms work, and I find it really easy to understand how the algorithm is working, how to tweak my story to cater to bigger audiences, what makes audiences on social platform appreciate visual projects, and then take these lessons and apply them to future visual projects. Also, what is really interesting, um, it's usually something that big newsrooms do, not smaller newsrooms because of resources, but taking a project and apply the best version for each specific platform is something that pays off in the end. So it was really fun taking stories that were shot, let's say, for TV and applying them and reworking them to work on Instagram, or doing original work for Instagram and then taking this and making it a series of tweets. This is interesting because you get really, really good metrics from each platform when you upload a native version for each one, and you can understand way, way better how the users in this platform are consuming our work. I have talked a lot within AJ Labs on gamification. I'm a gamer, so I have been playing games for years, and there was a point where I made a pitch in what would happen if we would use gaming not in the way that we did in AJ Labs. We have done some basic games, like mostly using game, um, let's say, terms and ideas to get people excited. I mean, you always, when there is a game, you always have a way to move, an aim, a specific like workflow that you do to get to the end of the game. So this was interesting in considering how to build a visual storytelling project or storyboard it. But then again, we were starting thinking what would happen if we would use gaming engines that are really really good in producing worlds, cities, forests, the world around us, so that we can write simulations of what happens when this is a part of the world. One of the pitches that we did is let's try to make a game in heavily quoted terms, on how refugees are traveling from Turkey to Greece through the Aegean. The idea of this, and we definitely could not shoot it. I would never put a producer on a boat doing it with a 360 camera or something. This would help us understand the challenges because, for example, we could easily create a simulation of waves and bad weather when a small boat is trying to cross the Aegean, or we could really easily recreate and give the audience to understand the distance and how hard it is to do this. So in this under this scheme, I'm really really interested on how Unity and other gaming engines can help us um, shape a world, and I think this is going to be really exciting. We're going to see really exciting projects with AR and gaming engines. I know that Unity gaming engine has already one component that creates the world within which you put augmented reality objects, and this is really really exciting. Obviously, there are the projects that the gaming projects like the Uber game that the Financial Times did, and this is an amazing, amazing visual project because I have played it from top to bottom like a few times to see the choices and the ideas that the FT team put behind it. And I found that this was really good in making a complex story really easily understandable by anyone. You just had to play a game to feel how an Uber driver, how an Uber driver's life is, and all the challenges and the dilemmas and the choices they have to make every day. So this was a really good use of gaming mentality for an editorial project. A project that I'm working a lot with, and I'm currently doing a training course for Al Jazeera Training Center, is on the story format. And to be honest, I've done a lot of stories for Al Jazeera, and the one thing that I'm excited is that when the story is not some random posting of what I did one day, or even when a journalist goes on deployment, just posts like three images and 2 videos of what happened there. I really, really like when stories are storyboarded and really well produced. Stories in our life are somewhat important right now, because I have been seeing metrics of people consuming stories on Instagram, sometimes mindlessly just swiping around, meaning that everyone right now is familiar and feels comfortable with stories. And I think this is because this is very engaging and short form content that anyone can produce from everywhere. And this is fair. I like its use for editorial. I like how our journalists from Al Jazeera, because I was responsible in training TV journalists in doing stories from the field. I like how they responded. If you go to Al Jazeera's Instagram, you can see a lot of highlights of stories that we did, that our TV journalists did were on deployment, or even our web journalists. One thing I'm actually currently doing in Greece is developing editorial uses for in Google Web Story format, which is pretty much the same, and you own the URL, which opens up in a whole different set of uses when it's not locked within the platform, but it's freely available for you to do it. We've done a lot of, this is the previously called AMP stories. We've done a lot of these stories as well in Al Jazeera, and we found similar metrics with the Instagram stories, although these were web stories and not trapped within Instagram. But web stories, I think, are day by day, they are becoming a better editorial product. And I think they're definitely going to be a really good visual canvas to tell stories. I definitely don't want to forget this, because this doesn't go away. When we talk about visual journalism, the video stories are front and center. This is a huge, huge editorial product. And I'm not only talking about reports that we're putting up, but I'm definitely talking about creators and journalists going out and producing original stories on video format. This, for example, is a pitch that 2 of our producers pitched and eventually approved to make a series called Fork the System. The idea behind this was, what if food matters to us culturally, and what happens when, what are the difference between people who live in the same place, how they differently view food and everything, how food ties to the day-to-day. And the great thing with this type of thought, doing a short form episodic video series, is that based on the talent of the creator, means that they can bring, they can liberate a lot of stories. People are creators now, even with a smartphone or with cinema cameras or with mirrorless cameras. They can go out and do really nice video. And I think that, and the metrics definitely support that, this is not gonna go away. And I think we're gonna see better and better good traditional video stories. I'm mostly excited about scripted shows rather than news of the day. Obviously, news of the day is huge for organizations to produce video versions of news for their audience. And this big boom of YouTube creators, though, makes me really, really optimistic about what's to come on when you give a journalist a camera and tell them to go out and produce a show, or come back with a good visual storytelling product. Very related to that is one niche example of video that I definitely want to work more a lot. And taking Vox as a huge example, they just built a video empire based on answering questions and explaining the why and the how. I mean, everyone knows that who, what, where, and when, but the why and the how are sometimes so complicated that building a product around video to explain this is a brilliant idea. And I think that this is not only not go away, but this is going to be even bigger in the future. The addition of everything that you can design for this, from maps, from like data and any other material that we put into an explainer, is really, really important. But then again, it's not only explaining complex material and taking like 20-minute videos to do so. Al Jazeera did a series called Start Here, and the premise is this: I want to tell you what you should know in a discussion about a matter. I'm going to give you like basic information and explain to you why this is important. That's it. It doesn't even have to be bigger or like go deeper into the issue. Just give you the basic facts that you want to know in a visual way that will package it in a nice narrative and very, very much understanding story for all your audience. I mean, this is really important, and I think that we will definitely see more about this. I'm sure that I think that you recently had David, my really good friend David Dunkley, talking to you. This is what I'm gonna be doing in 2021 a lot, and I've been talking about cinema journalism ever. I think it was 2014 when I first met David, and he was really excited. And we talked a lot in London about what does cinema journalism mean for news, which in essence, I know that David should have explained it way, way better, using cinema cameras and workflows and tool and all the cinema's convention to do better visual storytelling on video. And for example, what you see here with, I was watching a series called Wormwood, and I got as an outtake from a professional editor how many cameras the DP used to create like interview angles, which is hugely educative to me when I'm going out and shooting an interview. Using a professional director of photography's eye on this definitely improves my work and definitely improves what we call conventional and boring and like the TV news that you are used to see and the video that everyone's used to see. I was watching during the Black Lives Matter thing earlier in 2020. I was watching a few filmmakers taking the cameras and going out to see what was happening during the demonstrations or the lootings or the clashes with the police. And they had a whole other different visual approach on this, rather than running around like this urgent rush to get the good shots, to get the good audio and everything. They were trying to build characters um, through the protests, trying to visualize very differently. It was like definitely watching film or watching a TV series and being exposed to all these Netflix and all the other streaming platforms. I think our our visual taste has updated so much, um, and I'm really excited to see how a cinema approach to journalism could change our the traditional TV video reports. Um, I would suggest to read a lot of the stuff that David has written because he's a huge expert on cinema journalism. But to me, as a cinema enthusiast and as an definitely not up to this level of amateur filmmaker, I really, really am excited to see if we're going to see more of the cinema values pushed into daily storytelling with video. And then there is the projects that are merging the physical and the digital world. Phygital is a term that I've seen like a few years back. It's an interesting term, but this to me is extremely interesting as a producer of projects. And I'm telling you this, when you're producing a visual project, you're thinking of all the outputs. And then you've thought of platforms, you thought of how to set up a workflow, how to set up specs for everything, how to optimize your deliverables, and then thinking, okay, my story is going to be consumed out in the real world. Is there any possibility for me to make a project that will have also a physical presence? And when you produce something that is going to be consumed on device, you know the environment and everything. But when you produce something that is going to be consumed in the physical world, we need to understand who is going to use it, where and how, and there are so many different parameters. But I think that phygital is a very interesting area to think on how to produce, because I think it makes you a better producer. AJ Contrast did an amazing project called Still Here. It was actually featured on festivals and it was really, really well awarded. It's a project about telling the story of Brooklyn in New York in the 70s and how it is now, while narrating the story of 8 Black women who were incarcerated back then and how the Brooklyn has changed. It is a very, very interesting, let's say, merge of the digital and the physical world, using not only augmented reality, but using everything. Most of all, using storytelling. Not building installations, but actually using AR to let you know how Brooklyn was back then. And if you think about it, in the heart of all the digital stories that we tell are people. So people who are living in the physical world, and the stories of communities are very, very physical. So taking the story into the real world, in my mind, is really exciting if you have a story that you can pull off in this way. So I don't know, what do you think of this, or if you're excited or not to work in these types of projects? But I'm definitely, when Dev asked me to speak with you, the only thing I told him that I would tell you for sure was what I've learned developing all these types of projects for the past 7 years with Al Jazeera. Do not take them, obviously, as testament or would argue. This is experience that I got, and I think that whenever you're pitching a visual storytelling project, you should at least consider and maybe keep in mind. Let me be Captain Obvious in the beginning and tell you the most common rule that we tell everyone, that there is no video storytelling like audio storytelling. Unfortunately, I've been seeing a lot of people producing visual projects and do not care about audio but care about video, there are bad video projects that sound well, and it's pretty easy to follow through. I don't know a great video project that sounds bad that I've sat through and watched it all. Audio can make or break a story. There is a huge rule when you're storyboarding or putting together a complex visual project. You put a lot of stuff in it. I start by putting everything in it and then having the time of my life cutting it. What I'm doing when I'm planning a visual story is literally imagine how the story can be told in an amazing way, and then put myself in the position of the audience. Is this important? Is this necessary? Does this tell the story the best way, or it needs to be cut? I have cut more than I have produced, and I think this is a really, really good and healthy thing, because there are a lot that are just decoration. There are a lot of stuff that we put on visual projects that we just put there because we think they look cool, but a user would definitely tell you otherwise. I have been doing news design in Al Jazeera from 2013 to at least 2018. I have been hired to be a news designer, and thus, and this specifically, treating with user interfaces, gave me a really, really good focus on how people consume the story. One thing that was almost persistent in every story that we did was that people don't want you to be there all the time, don't want to hear your narration all the time, don't want to see your menu all the time. A good UI designer and a good news designer creates an environment for the user and then lets them enjoy it without being all the time like persistently telling them how to do it. Users are really, really smart and will go through your story or their interpretation of the story, how you want to consume, how they want to consume your story. You just have to be there to give them the specs. This is your menu to navigate. If you're doing a story, just tap right to move, or you don't need to over explain, you don't need to be persistent, you don't need to build huge user interface elements to cover up other stuff. Just let them have an experience. Just make sure that they know how to navigate your project. And again, user interface, and this is very well connected to the previous one, user interfaces are now getting smarter. If you think that voice is now an interface, text is definitely an interface. As you saw on my Palestine Remix case study, you would just highlight some text, and this could be literally an in-out part of cutting a video. Gestures are interfaces. Maybe you should spend some time when you're building a visual or interactive project thinking, how can a user navigate apart from scrolling or pressing play to watch? Maybe a new user interface will give you added value to your story. We did this with text on Palestine Remix. It wouldn't be the same if you had a video player and people would have to set in and out points to do so, to cut segments. But using text highlight was a smart user interface that changed the way this whole project was about. Another thing that I'm doing when storyboarding is when I finish storyboarding, I just sit alone in my office, and it's I mean like being alone for a second and going through the beginning to the end calmly and going through the story, because I have found that sometimes people are so eager to build a nice visual project and they're putting everything in there, like telling stories that are non-stop action, and here's what's happening, and dozens of visuals, dozens of information and everything. A really good rule that you'll understand after a few times of storyboard is using some transitions between points of interest. No one wants to go running on speed. It's not like Michael Bay cinema. It's not like explosions and stuff happening all the time. This is actually, this is a really good lesson that you can take from stories that you see on cinema and on TV. Taking your time, giving breaths to the audience, giving them something to be excited, but then take a pause, like give your story a rhythm before they pop onto the next action point. Give some nice breaks of the action. And I think storyboard can help you a lot in doing that. And you can even practice with actual stuff that you're doing now. Another thing that I'm always doing when I'm thinking of a visual story, yeah, is, can it be personalized? I mean, we usually do stories that talk to everyone, but what if we create a version, like a version of the story that you can enjoy more than the generic? I know that this is a really good engagement technique, because every time we've done stories that are specific for someone, or you can customize, or you can put all the parameters that matter to you. This was a whole other experience of a visual story. And this is the biggest selling point of Palestine Remix. And since then, it has been so important to everything that I do. Stories that are not discoverable, I have no use for them. I have no use if I cannot find a story, either like a video story, if it's not properly tagged, a story that has no proper SEO when it's like a text story. We used 20 films where captions were burned into the film, so you could never say it on Palestine Remix, and we have to script everything. So from the moment that we scripted everything, everything was searchable. And this goes back to the web stories versus Instagram or Snapchat versions of the story. A web story is searchable, and to me, this is really important. It's not only the story per se, but the discoverability of the story, the ability for someone to search a huge, long form for that one word they may want to. So it's not only discoverability on search engines, it's discoverability of stuff within a huge project. SEO and tags and everything is extremely important on how your audience is going to consume your stories. Pretty much everything that I've told you on how to produce a visual story comes down to the output, which is what are you going to push out for your audience to see. One thing that we always did, and one thing that technology plays a huge part in it, is how stories are going to be fast, are going to be, you have a video, you play and it starts in a second, or it automatically plays. You have a scroll that doesn't wait for 1,000 of other stuff to load, but it scrolls smoothly. This makes or breaks a story. This is a hugely important, especially when you do visual storytelling on the web, and it's amazing to use parallax effects and everything if it helps you tell the story, but you have to find the way to tell them without the end product is slow and it feels that it doesn't run smooth for your audience. Because if it does, and I am guilty of doing it a lot in the beginning when I was testing like long form stories, I've put everything in. And I see these types of projects now, and I say, what are you thinking, man? And why do you do it? Why did you have to put a parallax scrolling here just for effect, just because you could do it? We had a workflow at AJ Labs where we would say that we want to have one between, or at least 1.5 seconds of loading time. If the story doesn't load after that, you're gonna lose users. So we optimize our projects a lot. And the last thing that we did when we launched the project was taking metrics and understanding how our audience consumed whatever project we threw out. Initially we thought that when we do long form stories, time spent is a really, really good metric, and it actually was. In our first long form that we produced, we have something on a typical long form of like say 3,000 words and visuals. We had something like 4 minutes of time spent on the page, which was really, really interesting. Made us understand that people are really reading the story. So at least the best part of the story. But eventually, and this is what social platforms teach you day after day, if you have a project that does not end with, what do you think? How did this affect you? This doesn't matter. To me now, every visual project that I do has to have a way to be saved, to be shared, even a version that can be delivered to another platform that people can comment. I don't really much care about likes, but I'd rather get saves and shares of the project, because this means that people think that this is a really, really good project. And all of these engagement metrics make me view my visual projects with another eye. And again, this can help you while you're storyboarding. How many opportunities are you giving your audience to engage? If you don't, you just have the lean back product where people just sit back and watch. What I really want is lean forward projects where users will start engaging with my project. So everything that we've learned at AJ Labs, and this is a view of the Batcave, of the previous Batcave. This was the place where everything was happening. We did it for a reason. And the idea began when I was visiting the US in 2015. And one of my closest friends there was, at this point, design director of the time. So he invited me to go and do something that they really, really did every Friday at 1 o'clock, which was the lunch day of the last working day of the week. They would get pizzas and they would sit around for an hour talking about projects they saw, projects they produced, projects they would like to replicate, or like good influences or bad influences, good and bad practices. And they were doing it within the team. So we did it. We invented Karak chats where we get tea for everyone. That was a part of the discussion, and we just make case studies out of that, create good, create a workflow and a what I've learned section for everything that we produced. And then we opened it to the newsroom, because what we found to be extremely important is that when a visual desk is working together with journalists, and we always mention, because this is our work, I want to do it in D3 or JavaScript or whatever, and people do not know what this is, you will never get a good cooperation. So what we did, we took teams and we showcased what we are interested about. This had an amazing turnout. People would say, I have this story. What do you think about this story? Could this, the one that you showed me, the breakdown, can work for me? And honestly, this makes better projects because of the better cooperation, and people seeing ideas, what ideas you may have, what I saw yesterday on the internet, and it sounds like maybe we have a use for this. Influences, look what this newsroom did. All of this, making it an open discussion, is really important within the newsroom, and it definitely helps when you're collaborating with other people on visual projects. So I know that I'm not a part of Al Jazeera anymore, but I have a huge love for this team. And actually, when we are at AJ Labs, when I was with AJ Labs, we wrote a guide on how to pitch to Al Jazeera. So if you're considering that you have a project that it may be an Al Jazeera project, I would say read this. In essence, it boils down in 5 elements on how to do a pitch. You definitely need to be clear, and this will definitely help you as you're writing a description. Like writing a description for your project will definitely help you on how to do the final project. You need to write a good pitch. You need to think the ways to tell the story, because if you have a huge novel and weird way to tell the story, maybe this is different. Maybe this is not the way to tell it. So writing down your pitch and clearly stating how you as a storyteller want to tell the story is really, really important. And then think about how to communicate this story to do better justice at it. Think about how this story is best said. And is it a story that Al Jazeera cares about? Is it within its audience interest? And definitely, not every pitch is going to be approved. I've been part of so many pitch meetings, and I've seen good ideas being destroyed by a bad pitch, and then people coming back after they see, because we always responded to everyone who we were rejecting. We were responding with a link to read this, read how to best pitch to us, or even get in touch, or like message me on Twitter and tell me, would you be interested about this story? I mean, a lot of people have, and this idea about being persistent and being interested in only creating the best version of your story is the way to get your story done. This is pretty much everything that I can think of when I'm talking about my life with Al Jazeera and all the projects that we did. You can check out on Twitter feed. I have a link on my Behance, and you can see some projects, or you can look for AJ Labs on Twitter and on Al Jazeera web to see more. Definitely, we are just a small part of people telling stories. So I would suggest try to find the best visual storytelling teams across all newsrooms and try to learn something from them, because creativity is booming every day. And it's not only technology. It's not, I think it's the people having a need to see better visual stories, to experience better visual stories. I mean, it's the audience needs that drives newsroom go over and above the day-to-day to produce this stuff. And I've seen a lot of newsrooms do amazing work. I cannot even stress how New York Times does visual journalism, or Guardian, or the BBC, or everyone. So I would say, like, follow them and try to learn from them. I'm happy that a lot of people are using Medium or Substack or other platforms to give how we did it version of every story. But if you don't, just ask. I mean, if you see something that you're interested in AJ Lab, either like message me on Twitter or message AJ Labs and ask. And I'm sure that you're gonna get an answer from the people who created that. It's no huge mystery. Everything is so open. And what I've seen from all the years that I'm doing visual storytelling with Al Jazeera is that newsrooms are extremely open with one another. Doing in my first conference, I was sitting on a presentation of the person who was the newsroom leader of New York Times when they did Snowfall. So he just laid everything out. It's not a huge secret. It's trying to get newsrooms do better visual work. And this is pretty much fighting the mundane, the day-to-day stuff that we're doing, is a really good recipe to pitch a new visual project. So everyone is trying to get visual journalism somehow recognized, somehow help one another create better visual stories. You'll be surprised on how many discussions you can start or you can be a part of on Twitter with people who have done visual stories. That's it from me. I mean, I'm happy to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, guys, thank you, Konstantinos. And questions, please. Question time.
Sorry?
Yeah, can we have the screen? You know, they might want to ask you in.
Yeah.
On cam.
I want to stop screen sharing. Yeah, sure.
By the way, you know, it's a very pleasant coincidence that Konstantinos, you know, we're going to have Yusuf. Yusuf is a friend of mine, and so is David.
Perfect. I guess it's getting dark outside, but I still hope you can see me.
Yes, guys. Go ahead, please.
Sir, this is Niladri here. Sir, I wanted to ask the stories that we pitch for Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is pretty much open about uh, adapting to new technologies, but most conventional media houses stick to, limit themselves to older means of technology to retain the kind of quality that they have in their newsrooms. So how do we? So we are not marketing professionals who are, will pitch the ideas of emerging technologies in front of them. So how do we as journalists tell them that our stories demand those kind of technologies that should be worked in these newsrooms?
If you were to do this question to me when I was at AJ Labs, I would say, the first question I would say, is it the best way to tell the story? And if it is, for example, the best way to tell the story to come up with augmented reality, like conventions to build this complex thing, I would say, can you do it? Or if you cannot, and if my news organization didn't have a department like this, and let's not kid ourselves, businesses, newsrooms are businesses, so they would not invest a lot of money in doing a story that takes a lot of time, requires a lot of people just to tell it differently. So I would first say, make your pitch, make the best version of the story in your pitch. If your story is too complicated to say, to narrate in regular terms, like if it requires huge resources or technology or man hours to be done, maybe this is not the best version of the story. Maybe this won't get this accepted. So I would suggest try to dial it down a little bit, find some more feasible way to do it, or just hold on to it, because I've seen stories. Technology every day can help you tell better stories. So whatever AR we did years ago, we did actually a really good visual 360 story that was pitched by a colleague who was going to the Hajj every year in Saudi Arabia. So she said, this year, I'm going to take a 360 camera to try to let our users know how it is to go and do everything, like how it is to walk around with everyone else. And this was a really good way to tell a story, and it was cheap, and it was very simple because we just have a simple handheld 360-degree camera. If you tell me this story now, if you come with this idea now where we can have like drones and everything, or augmented reality, because this year telling this story is totally different than any other year. It's a whole other workflow behind it. All I'm trying to say is that if this isn't interesting to a newsroom, you can either make it interesting by seeing how this can be produced. You can either get up to the level to produce it yourself so that they can employ you as a freelancer, or hang on to it because sometimes in the future, maybe it's cheaper and better or you find like you can produce it more easily. This is the more pragmatic aspect of this as a producer who was approving pitches. This is what I would tell you if your pitch came to me. But there is another thing that you could do. You could make a pitch and make yourself available to work with them as a freelancer for some time if they want to do it, because then they can take you in and they can use some of the resources and you can bring in. We used to do it on Al Jazeera a lot. We would take pitches from people who would come to work with us for a month. We would cover some basic expenses, but mostly we would like to see how people work like as outsiders as part of our team, and we help them produce their project. They get their project produced, so pretty much everyone wins. I don't know if this answers your question, but this is kind of what it happens in these types of newsrooms.
Understood. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you about like when you started getting more into visual storytelling, especially VR. Like what kind of ethical concerns were raised and how did you like address them?
What? Sorry, missed your
What
second
kind
part.
of
What?
ethical concerns, especially with
Yeah.
VR?
Well, ethically, the most important thing to me when we were doing the first 360-degree project that we did was the one I just talked about, the Hajj. And obviously, the biggest thing is revealing identities and showing clearly other people who were not signed up to be there. The first thing that I care about is it safe to do so? The first thing, because it's unethical to send someone in a war zone or in an environment that's hostile or whatever to do this. Other than that, because 360, and I'm telling this because 360 may reveal something about locations or about the locals that you don't want on the air of a network like Al Jazeera. Other than that, all the rest is like any other journalist project. It's being visual means, I mean, I was used in sometimes design something to be an interpretation of what was happening, just in order not to, go into specific what this location is and whatever. Obviously, VR projects, and whenever you're talking about geolocation and tagging other people on social media and stuff like that, is somewhat of an area of concern about ethicals. I know that a lot of the team, in especially the field producers at AJ Contrast, who are doing VR projects on the field, have a lot more to say about that. I can happily connect you with them, or you can ask them at AJ Contrast across all platforms. But if you want something specific on their VR production, I will happily connect you with them.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So
please
Jyoti
go
here.
ahead.
Thank you for your lecture. So it was very insightful and very comprehensive. My question was about a lesson that you mentioned about trying to personalize a story to the audience. In some formats, it's
Sorry, too?
that we should try to personalize the story to the audience. So in some formats, it becomes fairly clear how to do that. Like the format itself lends itself to that. For example, in games. But how do we do that where there is a time constraint? I mean, in those formats of storytelling.
Well, it's not always doable, for sure. We used to do a lot of web projects. I mean, one of the visual projects that we did it for another reason, just to experiment with machine learning. But we found that it had a huge personalization aspect, was how much this product costs in your country. And if you give me a second, I can find it and I can put it up on the chat. Give me a second, sorry. Oh yeah, I found another one that is pretty much similar. The how much my country voted at the UN. Um, I will put it up in the chat. Sorry, I'm going through a very slow computer here. So this is one I'm gonna find before we finish. I'm gonna find the other one. When you're doing web storytelling, the personalized aspect matters a lot to people, because instead of telling everyone how do countries vote in the UN, we found that it's really nice to say how my country has voted, because you can definitely search for every country, but for sure, I mean, I searched for Greece first, just for fun. And then we had a similar project about how I need to find the other one. I will find it before I finish. So I would say that whenever you can personalize on the web, it's good. Maybe a way to personalize stories is when you're using social platforms and you want to engage, saying how would this be relative to you, making people give you comments or something else, like their own experience and everything, just by adding an engagement opportunity for people and asking them how it is related to you, to me is a pretty solid personalization on social media, but definitely cannot be done on all platforms. It cannot be done on any visual storytelling project. I just want to say, if you see the opportunity, grab it. If it's interesting to your story, if it has an angle to your story, it's better to say how my country voted. It gets more people in than to say how every country voted.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
If it answers your question, I hope it has. Sorry. A lot of them are, case by case, and we have been chatting a lot when I've talked in the beginning about thinking platforms and doing projects that work across all media. Maybe you don't. Maybe you not all deliverables are able to personalize, but then you find a way to personalize on another platform, which is important as well. So
yeah. So I was confused precisely because on online, you don't know who is going to consume your content. For example, if I'm talking about a particular community, I can't address the community member necessarily because they are not the only ones going to be consuming it. But the thing about pronouns, etc., yes, it's applicable everywhere. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. I mean, in organizations like Al Jazeera, you can definitely not do this. And so, you have a very wide audience that it doesn't. But then maybe you find an angle to personalize an aspect that pretty much everyone would care. Making someone care about something and actually telling you how they did it, because personalize something is one, how I personalize my experience, and then getting feedback about how the other person feels about it is a similar version of personalization, and actually to me is more useful because I can see and improve and get the results and everything. So maybe if you cannot personalize it in one way, in one of the deliverables, maybe you can on another one, even if it's minor or typical on social media, but it may get you there.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Anybody else?
It's not a question as such. I just wanted to know if uh, technologies like VR and augmented reality, have they been used for stories related to sports, or they're just uh, experimenting right now and they haven't um, experimented with the field of sports or for storytelling?
Your sports, right? The field of sports. Well, playing sports, one thing that is, well, let's think about covering stories like this. I've seen a really good, I have a friend that I met on a conference who's a journalist at the BBC 5. And what he did was he won in the World Cup. He presented as a case study. He went to cover the World Cup in Russia, the last one. using a 360 camera and starting thinking ideas on how to get people excited about the World Cup. And he was also a radio journalist, so he was just posting on social media. And he did it by covering the stories that TV didn't cover. I mean, 360-degree video in VR is really good at getting the unseen seen. And as people are really interested in covering big sports events, there is always a story of what happens in the background or what happens on the whole environment, or largely other outside of where the TV cameras are shooting. So what he did is take his 360 camera and do a project every day where he walked with one, I think it was Dion Dublin, an ex-football player, and they were walking through Russia, talking to people, talking to fans. I mean, back then when it was, obviously full of people, and giving his BBC viewers another angle, giving them other visual stories than where the camera was targeting at. So in this sense, it's really exciting, and visual journalism is not just showing, goals or baskets or whatever. It's showing everything around. This was a whole other experience, and it was really, really interesting. And TV is way too traditional and set too much in its ways on what is to cover. So it's up to emerging technologies to get people excited, especially fans, because when you're talking about sports, you have a very, very dedicated part of the audience, like fans, who definitely want to consume more of the team and of the sport. So it's a really good idea to pitch stuff like that. We used to have in Al Jazeera, we always used to have, when a World Cup in football or cricket, apparently, and apologies, because I have no idea what this is. A lot of people have tried to teach me, and I really have no idea. But I understand that it's extremely important. So I have put together visual projects on cricket that almost exclusively they did two things. One thing definitely is to try to explain to people like me, because this is my advantage, trying to explain visually to people what cricket is and how important it is and how it may change your life. If you're an Indian, seeing your team playing at the World Series, I don't know if I'm correct. It's really important. And then it's showing the unseen. So we have been doing it with 360-degree cameras. I guess AR is extremely important for this. It just requires ideas that I'm not sure are doable with what means that I have right now to do so. But it's very interesting. I mean, before I joined Al Jazeera, I used to be leading the sports desk at a TV station here in Greece, and this was I connect a lot with this. I find a lot of use in using visual journalism in and around sports. So I'm sure that it's definitely doable. I would for sure go for show what no one else is showing.
Thank you, Konstantinos. This has been so informative. And would you like to share? We would like to have. It would be great if you could share your presentation with me. And I can
of course, I will send the PDF to you. It's on Keynote, so the videos won't be playing, but I will send the PDF to you.
Sure, thanks. And some of them might get back to you over something, your email. Can I share your email with them, please?
Of course, anytime. Email, Twitter, anywhere that you want. Just, I'm happy.
Thank you so much.
It was amazing and a huge honor to talk to you guys. I really love talking about the work that we did in Al Jazeera, because a lot of people when I was working there have supported our work as audience and viewers and have given us feedback. And I'm delighted to give every knowledge back about how it works. If you have a pitch, I'm happy to help push you to the right direction. I'm happy to even just tell me if you think it would work. I don't know. I'm happy to do this for you.
That's so very kind of you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes. Have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone, guys.
Thank you,
too.
sir.
Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.